Howdy, folks. Welcome back to NextDev FM, a show by developers for develop. My name is Dan Guzman, and I'm joined by my beautiful co-host.
Ryan Vogel.
And
Because people call me
Yeah,
that
so
often.
I'm actually fired, and you are now the co-host. So you and Dan are gonna be interviewing me. That's how it's gonna work now.
Yes, you've been promoted, Chuck. Welcome.
I'm very prepared. We're just trading shows. It's totally fine.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly.
Yeah,
I
there
think
you go.
it's a great business idea, actually. Think about it. Right?
Yeah, show swap.
Anyway, why don't you give us a quick 2-minute snapshot of who you are and what your careers look like?
Oh, I'm on the other side of this finally.
know,
Okay,
right?
so my name is Chuck Carpenter, but some people on the internet know me as Charles William Carpenter III. I am co-host of Whiskey Web and Whatnot. I am head of engineering at a cybersecurity training platform company called Anagram. What else am I? I've been doing this for 20 plus years. See here. I've been in the startup game. I've worked for many enterprise organizations, a lot of e-commerce and media, everything in between. Happy to be here.
So you've been doing podcasting for 20 years. So
no.
you did it back when when podcasts were before they were cool.
Back on radio.
You sat out on the street corner and was like, so today we're gonna be interviewing. You did the street interviews.
Here I was doing those when they used to do the news at the beginning of black and white movies. Update on the Nazis. Anyway, that's probably a little too close.
And we're demonetized. Alrighty.
All right. That was fast. That's a record time, actually.
I know, right? Speed running demonetization. There we go.
Yeah,
that's okay.
perfect.
We don't have any.
I'm here to
sponsors
sink
other
all
than myself.
businesses.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna go way back. How'd you get into software development?
Yes.
What doomed you to this career?
Well, let's say this. When I got involved, they were calling them webmasters and web designers and sometimes web developers, kind of depending on what you worked on. So I am not formally trained, so no CS degree here. I actually initially started out in school for architecture, went into digital design, pursued photography, art history, things of that nature. And when I first started, well, I guess there's a few steps before that. I was really into like building my own computers for a little while in college. So that was like the fun thing, put together your computer so you can burn CDs and torrent games and whatever fun stuff.
And legally listen to music, right?
Absolutely.
Completely legal.
Yes.
Yeah,
they were CDs that I had purchased that I made backup copies for, and
course.
sometimes would make mixtapes, mixtapes back in the day, but then they went to CDs. This was all music I owned. I just wanted to interpolate them.
Of course.
Yeah, and eventually I was working for a startup that was a internet service provider doing point-to-point connections for places that didn't have good internet, and they learned that I knew Photoshop from my photography days, and they were like, "We don't have to pay a graphic designer to make these changes all the time. Cool, can you help us?" And I'm like, "Sure, that makes me valuable, I guess." So I started editing design files, which eventually led to doing edits on the website. And at this time, it was tables layout with Photoshop images all sliced up as like the backgrounds in a table.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy the way we used to build websites and do graphics. So I got some books and jumped into that side of it so I could figure out this HTML magic, which is a programming language, by the way. I just want to say that was my first. Yeah, eventually getting into PHP and WordPress plugin customization and jQuery so that you can do some magic stuff on clicks in the client. And, the story just keeps rolling from there.
Interesting.
Very cool. Actually, this very much reminds me of the tech stack that I started working with when I got into website development. WordPress themes and plugins was the first ever thing I got to monetize. And my first personal website was made with tables, HTML4.
Wow.
It was really, really cool. Like when I learned that you can actually make the sidebar like float on smaller screen size. So like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Some of the
Anyway,
original CSS magic.
yeah,
No
yeah.
flex
Things just
boxes here.
No flex box.
no
Only
flex boxes.
floats only. Either you're in
Yeah,
tables and you're doing magic stuff, or it's all floats and you do some magic things there.
Yep.
CSS Zen Garden really opened me up to the crazy things you could do with CSS if you stopped attaching it to like style elements or
right.
style attributes on an element. Yeah.
Yeah. CSS Zen Garden is actually a beautiful resource, and I would look at it quite a bit. Anyway, I'm really curious. So you did a whole lot of things that um, are adjacent to web development. You got to do design. I understand you also got to do some marketing, right? As part of
At
your work.
that point, a little bit of it. I was doing a lot of customer support and like marketing assistant kind of things, not like quite as direct, but adjacent to.
You
Yeah.
were how old were you during this time period, if I may ask?
Oh, sure. 23, 22, 23, I would say, I guess, early on. Yeah.
I've always noticed it's like especially in today's day because I'm 20
Mm.
and any job that I've ever been to I'm obviously the youngest one, so they're like, oh, you know how to use a computer, okay, so you are now our marketing specialist or you're our primary designer, our primary web designer, this that the other. So it's like you wear every hat. It's when you're at the youngest, you're the youngest and you know about all this cool hip stuff, you get to integrate it all.
I think you're just hungry too. So you're like, it's not an imposition because you want to touch a lot of things. You want to get like challenged in new ways. And for me, I learned a lot from books at that time,
Right.
or I would go to Barnes and Noble and there would be all these like computing and design magazines and stuff, and I would use those projects as like inspiration to do stuff in my work. And
Right.
so it helped me learn a ton and then eventually like grow into more well recognized roles. I mean, I worked for a few different small businesses here in town, just sort of pitching myself as a webmaster and web designer and getting access to, to be able to do a few more things that way too.
Yeah. So when did you actually get into like programming web development? Like when your function became just writing code.
Yeah.
Did that? Yeah. When did that happen?
There was definitely a very specific moment that I can recall. So I was working for a multi-level marketing company here in Phoenix, and I know, right, snake oil, but they paid well. Like those companies, they make a lot
I
of money.
mean,
They
that's the
paid
best
well.
company ever.
It's
That's amazing then.
and there's an incredible like e-commerce aspect to it, so you learn a lot there. And so I was brought in as like a web designer, but then I was doing a lot of coding in the front end with like jQuery stuff and just JavaScript in general. And also at that point, I got a lot better at ActionScript. So the flash times when I don't know if you recall when they were like flash animations for your ads. So we'd
I
be
was there
I
for
would
the tail end of that. Yeah, so
yeah.
I didn't get to live in the glory days.
Oh, well, so I'd be writing action script to like capture events and do different things and drive people into our site. Um, so I would say that is kind of like a part of it. And then I started working with our e-commerce team and diving a little bit into .NET, old school .NET, so not good .NET, by the way. Um, it, very
It's going to
different
be
times.
ASP.NET, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it'd be C sharp and then in the .NET, ASP.NET framework, right? And it was a web forms time and all of that. But anyway, I was like diving into that quite a bit more, dealing with designs and making ads and whatever else, and still my hand in Photoshop. And it was lucky for me because I was more ingrained at that time with the marketing team, and we were kind of like doing front facing web delivery things, but then I got to have projects where I would overlap. I did a lot of like WordPress theme design and plugin stuff there too for event specific sites. So I had a VP of marketing kind of come to me and was like, it looks like you are covering two very different job functions. And I believe very much that you would benefit more from like either choose the design side or choose the code side. And I thought about it not very long. And I came back to him and said, I'm going to go the code side. And there was a few reasons for that. I was just it kind of felt like a whole new world of like, great, I can start at the bottom of the rung. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. Let's go down this path. He was pretty
Yeah.
surprised that I chose that path because that kind of meant leaving that current team. But also, for me, it took a lot of subjectivity out of my job functions because unfortunately, in the design world, you can have all the reasons why you chose this hue of green and, oh, we're an international company, you can't make that red because red means this thing for them, and you'd still have a manager be like, well, then let's go blue, let me put my stamp on it. And I had a micromanager at that time too who would just force iterations for the sake of of putting his own stamp, and he did work, so it would just make me do more work. So also just getting out of that, it's not subjective. Here's the business objective of what you're trying to do, the output is that, and your path is like, it's totally up to you. As long as the end
Yeah.
looks like that, that's it. I think that's fun too.
The
Yeah.
micromanagers are always fun. They're like, change this one thing. Oh wait, that didn't work. Okay, change it back, but I still
Yeah.
did this. This is my
Yeah.
fix.
I'm going to need a greater radius on your buttons. Like, oh my God, nobody cares. Thanks for forcing me into like craziness.
Right.
Yeah. I think you made the right choice, right? When you were choosing between design and coding. Coding
For-
is quite a bit more fun during that time period. Like the changes that the industry went through and the technologies that became a thing over that period. It was absolutely incredible to be in the field, I imagine.
Yeah, I definitely feel I can't imagine that had I taken the other path and I'd find myself in like Figma as my full-time job or something else like that. And it just doesn't appeal to me in the same ways. And I think I kind of grew away from art to a degree, and that's not art for art's sake. And I definitely have tons of respect for designers and UI UX folks, but eventually I saw like it didn't hold me captive in the same way.
Yeah.
Right. So with that company, what was your first project or um I guess yeah, coding project that made it into production?
Probably like I mentioned, the WordPress specific sites.
Okay.
So stand up a whole new site, would have developing new plugins to handling the ticketing system and things of that nature, the roles and leveling that were associated to a multi-level marketing company, because that's how the pyramid works, and then doing custom theming and stuff with that too. So I would say that was definitely the first round of things that I dove into, and I did a lot of those, and then ended up diving more into the e-commerce system when we were going to do some major revamps functionally and design wise.
Right.
I see. So what was next in your career after that?
Let's see here. It's funny because I worked for this company twice. And the funny story around that is, what was it? When I hit 30, I decided that I wanted to get rid of all my stuff and go travel because hadn't traveled a lot. I went over to Europe and did some volunteer work and made friends and bounced around and got free accommodation out of that. So I did that for about 7 months and did a little bit of like part-time freelancing during that, but then came back to that same company for a little bit until I got an opportunity. Actually, a colleague had moved to Washington, D.C., ended up getting a job with National Geographic, and then reached out to bring me out too, because he's like, you're
Cool.
adventurous, would you come out here? And I said, you know what, maybe I would. And so that was
Very
the next
cool.
gig, was National Geographic.
So what'd you work on there?
A lot of things. So the main tech team there was, well, when I first got there, we were primarily working as part of the digital newsroom. We were putting a bunch of customization features into their CMS. So the CMS was Django based. The production team that was doing all these crazy digital articles kept wanting to like push and do more and have like really great WYSIWYG previews and all that kind of stuff. So that was the first things that I was working on. Um, Yeah, like I said, that got me into Python, which I actually really enjoyed that language at the time. It was interesting because we came in and we started experimenting with CoffeeScript with JavaScript, which gave a bunch of really cool features that eventually made it into the spec.
Right.
Yeah, so like spread operators and stuff like that were only in CoffeeScript at that point, and obviously eventually made its way over. And so CoffeeScript and Python had a similar syntax, actually, bracketless and indent based and some weird stuff like that. But to me, Python was kind of a little more like talking. It's sort of like I'm talking to
Right.
the computer about what I want it to do, and that natural language kind of made it easy to pick up.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why Python is a lot of people's first language. Not for me though. My first language was QBasic, so obviously never can choose the easy route.
No,
But
of course.
I went QBasic and then .NET, thanks to my dad.
Nice.
Painful. And then after .NET, I went to Scratch, like scratch.mit.edu, like the block building things. I was like,
Oh,
I need a refresh,
right. Yeah. Let's get some sanity, a sanity
right?
check in it. Yeah. That's
But
That's
that's
interesting.
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 So
Yeah.
this was must have been the early days of Python. No?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know the history of these things. I mean, it
Me
was
neither.
Django time, so it had to
Right.
be, yeah. And Django was a framework originally built for newsrooms, so it was
Yeah.
like, a natural fit for where I was at the time.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
I don't know what you're implying, Ryan, but Python was created in 1989. Just saying.
Oh, it's that old? I thought it was like, see, I'm young, man. I
Yeah.
think like JavaScript was like created yesterday or some stuff.
But I don't think Python and web dev was that big at the time.
Right.
I think
I
it
thought it was
like
yeah, I thought it was more like back end sort of.
over the past 2 decades, it became more of a web thing from what I'm
Right.
seeing. Um, that's cool. So
Had,
you did some Django, you said, right?
Yep. Yeah.
You did
Django.
you did both front end back end from the Django app.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
What were they? Jinja templates for the front
Yeah.
end rendering stuff, and yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think the hardest part of that whole experience was virtual env and managing your local environment. That was the hard part. Making things was not that hard, but keeping this to where it doesn't completely ruin your computer, that was less fun.
And
Yeah.
back then, like the tooling for this was pretty poor.
Oh,
There
Yeah, it
was no
definitely.
was
such thing.
develop
Yeah.
locally and then drag and drop on FileZilla or whatever your FTP client was.
Well, that
Well,
wasn't quite what this was. I do have those experiences when at that like previous company, and let's say the previous 3 or 4, it definitely was an FTP client
yeah.
to push your stuff up.
Those were so fun because I remember one of my first PHP sites. It's actually for Mandarin 3D.
Hmm.
One of the first sites was built in PHP fully, and those were the good old days where I was just working right off a prod. I didn't even have like a local environment set up. I would just edit a change, double click, go reload. All right, that broke. All right.
Yeah,
Hopefully nobody orders anything right now. It's too funny.
we did have like change management. We used Bitbucket when I got there, and then when GitHub kind of got hot, we would do a bunch of side projects in that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Bitbucket, even nowadays, is more of an enterprise choice for version control, right?
With
Yeah.
Jira.
Yeah, with Jira, everything ends in Jira.
That's right.
You go and try a bunch of other stuff, and then most of the time it ends with Jira.
Yeah.
I haven't obviously I'm very young, but
You've mentioned that.
over the course of over the course of my past 5 jobs, I haven't had one, including the current, where I've had to work with Jira. So I am lucky so far. That will probably change though. But
Yeah, you'll get to a point where you've ground through it enough times where you're just sort of like, I don't know, this is the thing. I've got other stuff to worry about or complain about. And everything
yeah,
old is new again. This is my vibe lately. Everybody's like kind of chasing all these new whatever hotness things. And I'm like, I want to build something with Rails, actually. Rails is something that I have not really encountered in my career. And some Rails people are cool. DHH is sane. Yeah, and it's a true web framework in the sense of like it includes everything you need for an
All
application. You
batteries
don't have
included.
to go, yes. And I think there's something to that.
Yeah.
And these have been solved, like the fact that people will toil over job queues and mailers and authentication and all these other things. It's like, I mean, maybe that's fun if you want to dive into complexity, but isn't it really nice if like your thing just does all that to start with? And if you want to replace that later, whatever.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like, do you want to spend 10 more hours trying to deploy someone else's buggy fix, or just
Mm,
have the library that has it all,
yeah.
or the not the library, the framework that has it all?
Yeah.
Do you
So
write any Python like now? Do you
no, I haven't
dabble?
touched. No, I don't. I haven't. I have not dabbled. I took a look. I spun up a an app, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something, and I looked at Django again, and like it's SQLite by default. It's got some nice updates to it, and but then like the docs are like taking you down this virtual env
Yeah.
path again, and I was like, nah. I actually built it in Redwood JS instead, which is
Oh
as
wow.
close to a batteries included like JavaScript driven framework as I have found thus far. But and that was fun and whatever else, but the app was like, nah. Mm,
Do you think do you think JavaScript is the right framework for what the web is kind of settled on? Like, especially with these indie devs, like we see all these JS frameworks. What do you think about like that? Like, do you think that was the right choice?
Well, I mean, I think that we're in a pool that we have to deal with to a degree. I mean, I think if you'd have asked me that like 5 years ago, I'm not sure I would have the same sentiment, but like, I think a lot of it is just driven by what the workforce has available, right? Like, there are people that don't even know the fundamentals of JavaScript. They don't know what's in the basic API, but they know how to build things in React, right? And that's fine if that's like what is called for. If you're not doing crazy computer sciencey like things that have so much nuance, then I guess that's fine. But let's even say like there's no skill issue. It's just, I mean, because there are very talented people who write TypeScript, JavaScript,
Right.
React things. So there's no shade in that sense. What I mean is this basically it has the most resourcing out there. Tons of the learning is around that. A ton of like, so there's a lot of advantage like to going that path. So in the sense
Yeah.
of
And all
ease,
the AIs too. Like, you
yeah,
ask an AI to make a website, it's gonna probably do either be at least React, and maybe
yep,
like a Next.js or like a Vite or something like that.
yeah.
Um,
Exactly. So like all of like the recency is around that. That's funny you say that because it was yesterday, the day before, I was like trying some of those kind of no code prompting things. So
right.
Replit, Lovable, Bolt, and I was asking them because they're like I said, I want to try to build a Rails app. I want to see what they could build. And 2 out of 3 was just like, we don't have that in our available library. So I'll build it for you in
Interesting.
React. And one did like a Rails backend, but still insisted on a
A
React
React
front
front
end.
end.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
They're like, great idea, but we're gonna do it my way.
yeah, exactly. We're not going to
Which one
just
was the
render
one that
from
could
the
do it?
server. Um, it was either Replit
I
or
feel like it's Replit,
Bolt.
if I had to
Yeah,
guess, because
yeah,
Replit more has that sort of vibe of like cross-platform.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was that or Bolt? I'm certain of.
Yeah.
I just, for whatever reason, I've always been a more of hands-on type person, and I've never really just gotten the vibe of these like absolutely no code type things. I want to be able to see it, feel it, check it, if it, because I can look at code, I'm like, something's not right. I don't know what's right, and that's where I ask like Cursor Agent or something like that to like
Yeah,
vibe check the code. But when it's like I don't have any control and it uses like 30 use effects for, or use states for like a basic homepage, I'm like, this could be server rendered. What are we doing here? Like,
yeah,
come on.
yeah. I mean, it's against our ethos, really, right? Like we are builders. It's like
Yeah.
telling a carpenter that you're going to bring in robots to hammer everything and he can supervise. Like that's not it's probably not the exciting thing that people want to do. I think it's worth exploring. Like, let's see
Yeah.
what it outputs. Let's get a feel for what are the folks that have a loud mouth on Twitter and are like, it's over for you guys. I don't need coders anymore. I just want to see like what
Right.
kind of output they're getting. So in that sense, like, yeah, I personally don't feel like it's ready for prime time on an enterprise level. I could see it being really cool for personalized software though. Like, think if you wanted a budgeting app that was very tailored to some specific things that you need and you were going to self-host it, I bet one of these things could come up with something good enough.
For
And
sure. Yeah.
so that is cool. So I think to a degree, it can bring back personalized software and that is more accessible to more people. I think that's neat. I don't need to build every little app for every mom and pop shop. We know realistically they can't afford to hire people like that for the most part,
Yeah.
unless they have a nephew trying to break in who will do it, for $100.
An
So
underpaid worker. Yeah.
right, exactly. Like someone who's hungry is trying to get experience. I was underpaid for many, many years. And maybe that's why I'm grumpy that some people can become a senior software engineer in 5 years or less. I have seen it. I don't know if it's going to change with the hiring landscape these days, but when we were high demand, people would jump and force HR into putting them into particular brackets that
Yeah.
were not completely accurate because it's not just skill.
It's a lot about the previous knowledge. And I've noticed that too, because the previous job that I was at, I worked with basically a senior network architect, systems architect, and I know all of like the syntax and stuff like that for like, because it was a Windows based directory system. I knew Active Directory and stuff like that. And then he showed me stuff and he was like, "Oh, you do this with like Force and stuff like that." And I'm like, I wouldn't even think about that, because that's
Right.
bringing together so many different things. It's like the viewpoint that you think from. It's really
You
interesting.
you really have to have just experienced a lot of different things. And that's why I don't think
Right.
there's an accelerant there. You can know how to use your tools really well, but like from an ideas standpoint, where you can draw from, like it's just a smaller pool. You need a larger
Yeah.
pool. I think that there is sort of also like there's a lot of soft skills associated with that because as a senior person, you're sort of considered a leader, a guider, a mentor in ways. And so there's an emotional maturity that kind of goes along with that. There's an advocation. So, it's very much in the way that like as people move up in any career and they have to develop these like kind of political skills in order to get things done and get people on board and get them excited and also elevate them too, the force multiplier ideology.
Right.
Cool. Let's switch things up a bit and do a few quick web check questions.
Mm.
Backend or frontend? What do you prefer to work on?
uh I think anymore probably back end. Yeah, I like infrastructure stuff. I write a bunch of YAML configurations. I'm okay with that. I don't complain about it. Uh, and yeah, backend logic, like those things. I think I enjoy that more.
Cool. And you mentioned that you like working with infrastructure. Like, can you tell us a bit more about that?
So I used to run a software consultancy. And so I would have access to lots of different projects and overlap with lots of different size orgs. But we would do a lot of like enterprise staff org or staff aug. And yeah, so I have done the gamut of many things, but I have been down the path of Git ops, for example. I have learned Helm charts and Kubernetes things, and yeah, so that stuff can be very cool. So it's completely different than software development in the way of like feature dev.
Do
Yeah.
you use SST by any chance?
I do.
The
Yeah, I do. So it's funny because I came across when I want to say were they maybe still in version 1 or something. So I was working on an API in Lambdas and using the serverless framework and came across they just had really great documentation to start too. and was using seed.run, which was kind of their initial business of getting serverless framework applications into AWS. And so that was really cool. And so SST at that point was pretty light touch and AWS specific. So yeah, I have used it.
Nice. Yeah, we had Dax on.
That guy's a jerk. I'm
Right?
just kidding.
Dax, if you're watching that, he'll
Yeah, he's
come in our
definitely watching.
streams and
Yeah.
he
His dog will
jumps
bite
in our
you.
Twitch chat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
This also happened. Yeah.
we
Yeah, poor
oh
Taylor.
boy,
Anyway.
right? Sending prayers.
So,
Mm.
have you used the newer version of SST? They switched to Pulumi now.
Yeah, I saw that. I haven't. No, I've looked a couple of times at upgrading that API. It's for an open source app called Swatch, which was, I think, like basically open source SIP or something. I don't know. So Robbie, the Wagner, my co-host, he built an Electron app, and I just did the API for it.
I see.
Hmm.
Pretty cool. Since you mentioned Robbie, I'm quite curious. What's your story with Robbie? How'd you guys meet each other?
It's a funny story. So we first met because I interviewed him when I was at a startup in Washington, D.C. So after I left Nat Geo after 21st Century Fox bought them, and then they got weird. And I was at a startup building essentially like boutique fitness management. It was like a full platform for managing boutique fitness locations. Anyway, that's not the interesting part, but it was actually that was a Django API, and the front end was Ember.js. So it was my introduction to Ember.js. And
Interesting.
yeah, so we did Backbone Marionette at National Geographic on a couple of projects, and then I had actually started deploying React components throughout like universally used parts of the website. So if you were on the news site or if you were over on the events or travel site, you were gonna always get kind of the same top bar. And I deployed the first React components as part of that. Then I did Ember.js. And since we were posting Ember.js jobs and Robbie was a contributor to that project, he's still involved with it now. He's like on the learning team and some other stuff. But anyway, he came, applied for us. I hired someone else, but that's because they were my friend. And
You gotta hire the friend. You can't.
yeah.
Well qualified employee or your buddy. Come
I don't
on,
know.
it's-
Yeah,
a
I
clear
poached
distinction.
someone from National Geographic, so it was a known entity kind of thing versus the unknown.
Right.
But that said, we started running the Ember.js meetup in Washington, D.C., and Robbie got involved and helped us a bunch there. So I developed a relationship with him through that. And then he was working for the RSA, and he left there. He started ShipShape, that consultancy, and then kept trying to get me to work with him over on that. Eventually I did, and we partnered up and did that for, I don't know, 5-6 years.
Oh,
Interesting.
wow.
Yeah, wow.
Were you a co-founder of ShipShape?
I'm a partner, but
Oh.
he founded it, and he had it going for like probably a good year and a half or 2 years before I joined. So, and I was doing like some side work with him. He'd be like, "Oh, can you do 20 hours a week on this thing?" Sure. Side hustle's a fun way too to get a bunch of different experience and skills.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that one.
Right.
Especially
Your social
feeling
life must be
like-
amazing.
Oh, it's just lovely. So, we first met at React Miami, where you graciously lended us your beautiful podcasting setup. Which, once again, thank you for that. It was excellent.
Well done.
But you had a very special guest, Guillermo from Vercel, sat down and joined you, and I could see you bubbling over there. You were when he sat down, you were like, "Let's go! This is amazing."
Well,
No, you were very nonchalant.
No. I wanted to squash my beef with him. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it anymore because we kind of had to cut out some of my jokes before we published because that one came out yesterday. I'm sure you've listened on repeat. And I appreciate that.
Obviously,
Yeah.
it's the
Absolutely.
first time it was published. It just started playing into my headphones. I don't even control it.
Yeah. So I was just really excited to make some uncomfortable jokes, mostly, but it was a good conversation. Nice fellow, all of that.
That's cool. That's cool. That was you talked for a while too, wasn't it like it was like an hour and a half too?
I think I think it was almost like an hour and a half. It went for a little while. Yeah, we were just,
That's awesome.
the rum was flowing, conversation was flowing, lots of interesting things, talking about back when it was Zeit and you would run now in the CLI. Yeah.
Those
You
were
guys
the
not,
days.
Ryan won't remember. He wasn't born yet.
Nope. I wish.
Tell us, Dan, how old are you?
I am 18 in my soul.
Okay.
Physically,
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
25.
Okay. Fun fact, I am older than both of you combined.
Oh wow! That
Really?
is
You're
interesting.
93?
Yes.
Wow, you look great,
You are
man. Drop
good
the
at
skincare
math.
routine.
I wouldn't even use computers. You're like,
No.
Will Hunting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, or maybe more like Rain Man, 147 toothpicks.
Of course.
Did you ever
I
see
am
that movie?
quite curious.
I know. I understood that reference.
Excellent.
Anyway, I want to jump back a little bit on whiskey web and whatnot, and I want to hear the story how you guys started the podcast. What was the story behind that?
Can you assure me no one from the IRS listens to your show?
All right, we're gonna redact this segment from the editor. Cut this out.
Yeah, cut this one out. No, so running Ship Shape, and I want to say it was like the end of 22, something like that. We're kind of coming out of. I just had a quick brain fart there. Anyway, it was coming to the end of the year, and folks had been quarantined forever, and we're a little stir crazy. So we're like, what do we think about like trying to this podcast thing seems pretty cool. We listen to Syntax, we listen to this. There's some like kind of neat things here. Wonder if we could do something. We're not
You
as
listen to
smart.
NextDev, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
it didn't
okay.
exist then. But yeah,
But you
shortly
time traveled
thereafter.
to listen to it for inspiration.
Yes, and
as
that's
I would
where
assume.
I got the
There
whole
we go.
thing. So what you find out, well, first of all, when you have a consultancy, you have reduce your tax burden when you need to purchase things. So podcast equipment for two, because we're not in the same space at that point. I was back here in Phoenix at that then, and Robbie's in Northern Virginia, DC area. So we can't do the podcast together. We need all this equipment. What is the equipment that Wes Boss uses? That's the good stuff. So we're going to get those things and try it out. And we need to get clever. Marketing or just cost of production is whiskey. So it's whiskey arbitrage. The whole thing was whiskey arbitrage. How can we get more whiskey and get it pre-tax?
How can we
as a business expense?
whiskey? Yeah, exactly.
Bingo. It's a business expense.
How
These all
can we
the
make
equipment
alcohol a
expense,
business expense?
all these things. So we just so we thought about doing the show to get more attention to the consultancy and whiskey arbitrage. It's just like maybe it's just kind of fun.
You just gave me a great idea. Tesla. Let me think. Tech Talk in a Tesla, or Tesla Tech. So live stream in a Tesla, and we can expense the Tesla.
You can. There might be some oddities that are not interesting to listeners, but like when you get into vehicle purchase and it becomes a benefit, I don't know if then you have to share that throughout your business with other employees, whether they're partners or not. Yeah. But here was, I'm going to come back. I'm going to rewind it a little bit. So it was also like in terms of theme and whatever else, some of the inspiration was is that many tech shows, not NextDev, But many other tech shows, sometimes their interviews can be boring, especially because the guest will come and be like, "Tell me about your framework." Well, I'm going to tell you about my framework. It's the same thing I said on this one, and this one. And it's just kind of like, oh, now if I've heard it once, I've heard it a billion times. Let me get that same
Right.
person on, and sure, we'll talk a little bit about their thing, but like also like what hobby did you have 10 years ago that was a little weird? And a little bit about what you're saying is sort of what was the path that got you here, and what do you like outside of this stuff? Because nobody knows. They've heard you talk about, Vite or whatever, Next.js 100 times. They know what that is. And like entering a sort of a level of duress as part of that interview, which is like what Hot Ones does, right? He's a really good interviewer, much better than I, but like, so you have that, like a great interview show, but there's duress and it gets hotter and whatever else. So like we're just drinking whiskey, and if you finish what you poured, you're probably going to start to loosen up too, and then it goes where it goes.
It's like a Lex
Yeah.
Friedman thing. The longer you're on, the more you'll share. It's the long run.
Exactly.
But it's
Right.
just hyper
Yeah, we got to crush it down in order to get there, but it's the same like intended end result to a degree.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You guys
So
have a kick-ass domain name, by the way, Whiskey FM. I
I
love
have
it.
no idea how that happened. Like, it's crazy. Again, Robbie handles a lot of like the operational side of things, and so it's just one day we had like whiskey web whatnot .fm, and then one day we had whiskey.fm. So I'm not sure. Maybe we spent a bunch of money on it. I don't know where that came from. It's hard to say. We didn't divulge that,
you're like,
and I
one
don't
day
look
in the
for
books, we lost
Yeah.
$8.2 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe you don't want to
Oh,
know.
if we had 8.2 million and spent it on a domain name, I'd be really mad. So
Yeah, I don't blame you.
yeah, we got to get some Lambos, bro.
Yeah, that's right. Especially like this myth sort of that PHP developers are writing Lambos
Mhm.
on Twitter. Where does that come from? I've never understood this.
Taylor Otwell, he has a Lambo.
I see.
Yeah, the
Right.
Laravel guy, but he also has like Vercel for PHP, and he's, whatever. I don't know the specifics of it, but I know that's what it comes out of.
There we go. We
Yeah.
gotta get him on. When I go to Laracon, I'm gonna pitch him to come on here and talk about his Lambo journey.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe like get with Aaron and do this, soft intro in and all
Right,
that.
right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Aaron, if you're watching, I texted you and you haven't texted me back yet. He texted me about something else, but he didn't respond to the original. Like when you ask two questions to
Mhm.
somebody,
Yeah.
and you're like, great, now they're only going to respond to the least effort one, and he responded to the least effort one, and I'm like, come on, Aaron.
Yeah. I see, that's completely reasonable to me. So I would choose the same thing.
No, I would do
Yep.
the same thing too. I no hate,
Yeah. Except for text him back, jerk.
right? I think he actually might have responded. I was checking right now. I was like,
That was
oh,
all a lie.
maybe I didn't respond. That's the issue.
Maybe
So-
you aren't Maverick. I don't know.
I know. I got big shoes to fill in that scenario. So you do a lot of open source work. The birds have told me. What motivates you to do open source work? Is it just your joy of helping others? I didn't know that you were that nice of a person.
Yeah, I'm not. And I do significantly less of it lately, I would say. But in the past, it's been, I think some of the motivators are just some opportunities to learn something or do something new.
Right.
And sometimes in a job, you don't get as many opportunities to kind of branch out and try different stuff. And plus, it's kind of a safe test bed to a degree. So, and then the third reason would be there would be things I would use and find a bug. And rather than just create an issue, I would try to fix the bug. I'm like, let me see if I can fix this and help. I'm using your thing. Everybody, nothing's perfect. Instead of being like, hey, I need this, I just figured I'm going to contribute and try.
Yeah, it's helpful. It's helpful. So obviously, and the nice part about, well, the nice sort of bad part about it is last week, or was it this week? Yeah, it was this week. It was earlier this week. Time moves by so quickly. We interviewed the founders of Zero Mail, and we were talking about open source, and we were talking about how like they get a bunch of like AI like PRs and stuff like that, where you can obviously tell someone just like opened it in Cursor and was like, please implement these 9 features, and it like completely just wrecks the entire app, and they have to do this enormous code review. So where do you think AI should land correctly? Because this is always a hot take in this space. Where do you think it should land, and do you think it's on the correct path?
Well, I mean, that is very open-ended, especially since things are so new. That said, I use the tools, and I use the ones that I have felt like helped me the most or were the easiest to kind of grok initially and feel productive. And that's very much what I think they are at this point. They don't replace our skills and knowledge and experience. But like many things, they're just something that can help you accelerate a little bit. I mean, I find myself basically never Googling for solutions or ideas anymore, where I used to quite a bit. I mean,
Yeah,
it's your buddy, and you go down and you find a few paths and you try a couple of things, then you do your flavor of that, and that's how you get through a rut. And that I would say I don't do ever anymore. I talk to Claude a lot. I use Windsurf. I found that pretty good. Um, yeah, so those things have helped me be productive. And that's very much what I think they are for a while. I think
yeah. I
the
don't think
gap.
it's a replacement.
No, no, and never say never. I can't. I don't want to be naive enough to say we're never going to get there. But what I've seen so far, I feel like the gap is pretty big, and it's just one more tool. But you still have the human element, and you need that. Yeah.
I think it's really funny, the replacement thing. I was doing some work today, and for with an MCP,
Mhm.
and basically as a param you would take in like a to do ID, and it didn't work for whatever reason because I was passing the schema incorrectly. But when it passed it, and I said, all right, can you please fix this? What it did is for the schema to take in a to do ID, it replaced the to do ID with random underscore string. And then the description was a dummy parameter for a no parameter tool. And then it hard coded the to do ID in the actual like request. And I posted it, but then I just kind of sat back and I just said, I can no. This cannot be the way if it did that, because I'm like, that's just sad, man. Why'd you do that? That looks
Which
bad for both
which
of us.
which model were you using? I mean,
3.5. Claude
okay,
3.5.
okay, yeah.
Not even like a GPT 4.1 or GPT 4.0. This is 3.5 with a ton of context. Not like it was like a one shot with like no files or anything like that. It had all the previous context. And yeah, it did that. And I kind of just sat back and said, why?
I do think that there are points where it just kind of jumps the shark and all your context is kind of lost. You've been productive for a little bit and then it does some wonky thing and then you try to back out of that and it's like, well, this session's over. Okay.
Yeah, I think context management is going to be really crucial, because I don't think longer context is the way to go, because like with the new GPT 4.0 models, they've got a 1 million context length, which is great, but the needle in the haystack retrieval for some of those models, it's not the best.
Hmm.
And I think that managing lower context windows is better, because then it just feels more productive. And it's like, oh, you nitpicked this, this, and this. Great. That's awesome. Let's work with that, rather than just dumping the entire code base in.
Yeah, that's what I like about like Windsurf. Cursor can do it too, but you're providing context to the agent. You know, like highlight an area, and then you just want to talk about that. That helps a lot.
Yeah. So why did you pick Windsurf over Cursor anyway?
Um, I I want to say maybe this was last year. I don't know. Cursor was first to, the first forker. And I started trying to use it initially, and I don't know, I didn't like it. It was doing a lot. I don't even remember what model I had connected to, but everything I was getting just felt like garbage. I just also felt like, I don't know, out of my comfort zone where I could just get things done. And so I kind of dropped that for a bit. And I was on a project last year where someone was using Windsurf and just demoed out to us their workflow. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just the point in time of when I tried Cursor versus when I tried Windsurf, but it clicked right away. And I don't always use it, but when I do kind of jump in one of those, I always pick it.
I feel like
Yeah.
Windsurf has iterated a ton recently, because like you'll see them, they'll drop like a new wave like every like week and a half, and I'm like, holy cow, we're on wave 9 already.
Yeah.
And they seem to be a lot more receptive to user feedback. I mean, Cursor may do it, but when Windsurf like releases something like wave 9, it's an update instantly available. But when the Cursor has like this new 5.0 update or 0.5 update, and it's like it's rolling over the next 3 weeks, and you're
Oh,
like,
right.
that's great, but I can't really utilize it. And yeah, I'm gonna have to try out Windsurf, because this is the fourth person that's recommended it to me like now. And their new logo too. What do you think of their new logo?
I mean, it looks nice. Yeah. I mean, the whole vibe just kind of works for me. The look, I gravitated to Claude more too when it was like, okay, ChatGPT and Claude. And to me, at least, the serif font, the more softer tones, just like everything about it didn't feel like interacting with a robot. And
Right.
ChatGPT very much did. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Interesting. That's a big compliment to the brand, actually. That makes a lot of sense. Do you use agent mode at all as you're working with Windsurf?
I do. They call it a cascade or something
Yeah.
weird. Yeah, but I do, definitely.
Okay, so you actually use it to generate boilerplate or components?
Sometimes, yeah, it was like, I'll say, for example, so there was a project recently I was working with that didn't have any unit testing. And I was like, "Oh, great, I want V-test, and I want you to do the initial scaffolding out of that." And I let it control and do a bunch of those things, creating files and whatever else. And then I went to the service that I wanted to start my first test on, and I had it set up the initial boilerplate for that file too. So this was taking a class and all of its methods and breaking down just the initial setup and split into suites for each of those parts.
Cool.
Interesting.
And then dive in there and do your things.
Yeah. Another question, since we're exploring where language models can be used in software development lifecycle. Have you explored using it for code reviews at all?
Just Copilot in GitHub. There's like one that I saw announced recently called like Code Rabbit or something that looks
I
interesting.
actually, it's cool. This sounds like a shill, but it's not. When that was released, I jumped on a call with one of the primary developers and like designers of that to kind of jump into how it could like work into like my workflow, because I'm like, obviously he probably used it for about a week or something like that. And I found it, I've been using it for the past 3 days, I think. And I found it's really helpful for when you're like going out to lunch or something like that. And you're like, okay, I've done a bunch of work. Let me start this. It will take 10-15 minutes, and it will kind of nitpick and analyze everything and provide suggestions. That's the one thing I like. It will provide suggestions in line directly in your CLI. So that way you don't have to be like, okay, here's the problem. How do I fix this?
Right.
And I found it really helpful because I'm doing a lot of stuff with my advanced to-do app. But it's helped a lot of things where I've been like, oh, this is a nitpick that I didn't know I would have needed, but now I do. And yeah, so I highly recommend checking it out. And it's free. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with free.
To get 90 days free with code NextDev.
Right.
NextDevFM. Well, you said you weren't a shill, so I just wanted to make sure I threw that out.
Of course. Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah, excellent.
Yeah, I
So
mean, free is good.
free is good. Free. What beats free? I mean, just hot opinion. Nothing is ever free. What ends up happening is you're the product,
True.
right? Your
Right.
code is being used for
Yeah.
training purposes,
That's
which
true.
some people may not be okay with. Something to consider. Anyway, some rather philosophical question. At one of the All Things Web conferences, I think it was last month at Convex. I think it was Nippon from Convex. I don't remember. He gave a talk about how leaders and, in general, managers would excel the most with the advancement in natural language processing and language models because they know how to manage developers. And managing agents is sort of the same way as managing developers. But you have to fire people a lot more often, like every 5 messages, and you start a
Yeah.
new chat.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have to be like very thorough with documentation and whatnot because you treat it as a junior developer who doesn't know Jack. What are your thoughts about that comparison? And in general, how does it make you feel? This, yeah, this allegory.
Well, it is easier because there's no emotions to manage, having been in leadership a bunch of my career. I would say in that sense, it's easier. On the other side of things, I completely concur with the idea of you frequently are onboarding a brand new employee. And so having that preparation to set them up to be more productive as soon as possible, I get that to a degree. Sounds a little monotonous, though, as well. So would anyone enjoy that? Oh, I'm a more senior to a manager to whatever. I don't want this function. So maybe that's why I progress my career, not to talk to robots 65 times a day with repetition. But I don't know. I think the sentiment is probably not wrong, though.
Right.
As we've said, that context, a correct context is your best bet at repeatability in success across this. So theoretically, in that sense, yeah, absolutely, that does make sense to me. And I guess that's becoming a good prompt engineer or whatever they say. So doing more of that, but I do think that you can't just be good at prompt. You have to understand the outputs to have an idea of what's actually going to happen here. And you can't ever get that knowledge without doing it. So you can't prompt your
True.
way to being a senior engineer, right? So,
Is that a challenge?
I'm this industry will continue to surprise me. I just think in the traditional way of understanding it, it won't.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
But I'm sure you're right. Somebody's going to get like staff prompt engineer before you know it.
Really quickly, while we're on the topic, there was a question in chat. Guillermo, on his episode with Whiskey, had a take about needing a lot more developers to support the new generation of builders in software. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I love his optimism. It's the exact opposite of what many are saying. So I prefer to believe his version of it. Um, I think that we're in an age of technology that is accelerating and continuing to grow. I think that our education system doesn't include enough about that technology. So to the degree of, I think we need people with the knowledge to build, we need more of them. Absolutely. How that will be applied, I don't know. It's hard to say because in the traditional sense, we're already seeing that shift to a
Right.
big degree. I wish I could see the landscape and have some clarity on that. But then I guess I'd be running Vercel. So he's a smart guy. I kind of trust that he's not totally full of it.
Right. Well, in the good wisdom of advice, we always ask this because we're about to wrap up here. If there was one sentence or piece of advice that you could give previous you, like 10 years ago, what would it be?
Ooh, so that's two very different things. What would I tell myself 10 years ago versus what I would tell someone now? Um, I don't know, because even good and bad, and it's not to say that I've always had an upward trajectory in my career. I do believe very much that like you have to go through it and have those experiences to be where you are now. And I'm very happy where I am now. So I don't know that I would risk that. But just be curious. And I think, especially early in your career, be willing to, like, I don't know if you mind cursing on this show, but like eat shit for a little while and like do all the little crap
Right.
and work your
Yeah,
way
no, it
up.
makes
So,
sense.
yeah.
So that's actually the wrong answer. If you actually watch the show, you would know the answer is buy Nvidia stock. So next
Oh,
time you're on the
gotcha.
show,
Yeah.
you'll know that answer.
That sounds like Dax's episode, and I avoid all his content.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, we'll put that clip out there.
Yep.
That
Send
will
it
get us
to
some
Dax.
great views. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Perfect.
So, we'll wrap up with this one. It's the free plug session. So, where can listeners find your work and your podcasts and your blog and your cooking videos and all that other stuff?
I can't wait to pivot to cooking videos. I'm obsessed with cooking content, but that's a whole other problem. The easiest way is whiskey.fm. You can find all episodes, links to the episodes on the site, or listen directly on the site. It also links to our Twitter. I am almost nowhere else on the internet because I rage quit all that stuff a while ago. So that's the easiest one, whiskey.fm.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. It's been a great talk. Great talking to you. Good vibes. We can tell why you have a podcast. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on.
Sure.
And
Thanks for having me.
of course, yeah.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining in. Thank you for listening. We hope it hasn't been too painful on the ears. But next time we will see you. I don't have anything else to say other than that. All right. Peace out.
All right. Cheers.